Professor Stephen, are you there?
Yes, but his mic is mute.
All
Hi,
right.
sorry. Yeah,
That's fine.
I
Yeah, please
need
go
to
ahead.
step out just for a couple minutes later, but I should be back in time for the question and answer period. But I wanted to go and give my presentation now.
Please.
What we're seeing, we're seeing this pattern again that there will be a ceasefire proposal from the United States or others. Hamas agrees. Israel says no. The U.S. changes the proposal to meet Israeli demands. Israel still refuses to accept it, but then the United States blames Hamas for rejecting it. I mean, it's interesting. For months, the U.S. rejected the idea of a ceasefire categorically, vetoed otherwise unanimous UN Security Council resolutions calling for a ceasefire. Was one of only 9 countries in the UN General Assembly to vote against a ceasefire. But there's a lot of pressure from the American public and the international community for the United States to end its rejection of a ceasefire. So then the United States started saying, okay, we support a ceasefire. But it's kind of like them saying we support a two-state solution, which Washington only very reluctantly agreed to say after, again, many decades of domestic international pressure. They're willing to say they accept it, but they won't do anything to pressure Israel to make it possible. So you can have it both ways. So you have people, saying that the Biden and Harris are working round the clock for a ceasefire, when in fact it's very clear all they need to say is that we will suspend military aid to Israel until they agree to the ceasefire terms originally proposed by the United States, which does not include maintaining Israeli occupation troops in Gaza, which does not mean that Israel can resume the bombing after a few months. I mean, this is it's a trap, and I'm stunned at the number of people who are fairly fairly progressive in their politics, Democratic supporters who keep falling for this. I mean, it reminds me so much of how the Reagan administration would claim they were working for peace agreement in Central America while continuing to arm the brutal Salvadoran junta and the Nicaragua Contras, which are essentially a terrorist group. Um, the and it's very hard right now because here in the United States, the excitement of the changed presidential race and the conventions have largely pushed Gaza out of the headlines. And there's some disturbing things. I should let me talk about the Democrats though. I am active in the Democratic Party myself. While Arab governments have long agreed to recognize Israel in return for the end of the occupation, the Democratic platform appears to endorse Trump's efforts to undermine any leverage Arab states might have in supporting Palestinian statehood by pushing them to recognize Israel beforehand and to strengthen U.S. support for these autocratic regimes. Now, a survey of U.S. Middle East scholars revealed that nearly three-quarters of us recognize that the so-called Abraham Accords put together by Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, had actually had a negative impact on the prospects of peace, with only 6% saying it has had a positive impact. The Democratic platform, however, praises Biden for having, quote, directed his administration to build on the Abraham Accords and attempting to, quote, expand a historic normalization deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia. In other words, the Democratic Party is saying that Jared Kushner is right and the overwhelming majority of Middle East scholars are wrong. They are saying that we should push for this crazy defense pact, which according to reports, could involve a formal defense treaty and nuclear technology and things like that, to this brutal misogynist family dictatorship. And don't let anybody tell you it's to defend them from Iran. Saudi Arabia already has 6 times the military budget that Iran does, even though they're a much smaller country. And if you include UAE and the other Gulf states, it's more like 9 times. around military budget. Um, Now, those of you who are, but this is the negative side. On the positive side, and let me just preface this by saying that those of you who are familiar with my work, and you can check out my website, stephenzunes.org, um, you know that I've written and spoken extensively about the betrayal of the Democratic Party of its basic liberal values that it espouses regarding human rights, international law, and democracy when it comes to Palestine. So I'm a skeptic. But I do want to show some signs of hope. That despite her hawkish record as a U.S. Senator and some of her statements as Vice President, Kamala Harris, I really do believe, would be tougher on Israel than President Joe Biden. Don't expect any dramatic break with the current administration's policies in the course of the campaign. And the reason is that it's extremely difficult for a sitting vice president to be elected president in general. Only 3 out of 4 have tried since the early 19th century, and only 4 have tried since the early 19th century, and 3 of them lost. The trick is you have to find a balance between asserting your own agenda and not appearing disloyal by contradicting their administration's positions. This is particularly true on foreign policy. And
Prof.
according to those who know her, Harris is going to try to emphasize her independence from Biden without breaking with him. The Washington Post reported that how Harris has pushed the rest of the Biden administration to more heavily consider Palestinian suffering in its response to Israel's war in Gaza, lambasting the civilian death toll, calling for Israel to allow more aid into the territory, more forcefully and empathetically than Biden about Palestinian rights. Following her meeting on July 25th with Netanyahu, which she described as frank, she underscored her middle ground by reiterating Israel's right to self-defense and the imperative of releasing hostages, while highlighting the massive civilian casualties and ongoing suffering and the urgency of ending the war. In her speech accepting the Democratic nomination last week, Harris pledged to work for a future where Palestinians can, quote, realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination. It brought one of the biggest cheers of the night. I can't
Mr.
imagine Biden being that
Professor Stephen.
Yeah.
Stephen, thank you very much for your words, and I think you said that you have some commitment
No,
now.
let me just finish up with something real quick. I'm just gonna have to step out for a few minutes, then I'll be back.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. But from the near of from the start of near the start of Israel's bombing campaign, um, Harris was the first high-ranking Biden official to speak out against the high civilian death toll. She was the first to publicly call for a ceasefire and insist that Israel limit civilian casualties. In June, while other administration officials were unconditionally praising an Israeli raid that freed 4 hostages, she highlighted that more than 270 Palestinians were tragically killed during that attack. And along with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and CIA Director Bill Burns, Harris has been among those within Biden's inner circle who have tried unsuccessfully to push him to get tougher on Netanyahu. And another good sign, the vice president's constitutional role as president of the Senate, because of that, they normally preside over joint sessions of Congress, especially those hosting a foreign leader. And she used the excuse of having another engagement, but Harris's absence during Netanyahu's July 24th speech was significant and led harsh criticisms by both the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, and Donald Trump, who've insisted that despite Harris's outspoken opposition to anti-Semitism and being married to a Jewish man, she was totally against the Jewish people. They've even attacked her Jewish stepchildren for raising money for UNRWA.
Okay. Professor Stevens, thank you very much for